guys, it's Nick the Booksmith. Welcome back, welcome back. So as promised, I said that I would show you my favorite way to make book cloth, and so I will do that today. These are some samples that I have made. This was some standard quilting fabric, just cotton quilting fabric. And that is the back of this one. This is like a toasty oatmeal linen. And this is a linen blend in this beautiful aubergine color. So why do we need to make book cloth? Why can't we just wrap our books in cloth? Why do we have to make book cloth out of it? One reason is that when we're making books, we tend to use a lot of adhesive or a considerable amount of glue. The backing on book cloth makes it possible to use that adhesive without damaging the right side, the pretty side of the fabric that you will see on the outside. Adhesive has a tendency to seep through, and it could discolor and mar the front surface of the fabric. These are a few examples of some antique books that I have that are covered with book cloth. You can definitely see the texture of the cloth in this book. And this book as well, easy to see that texture. I don't even have to hold it up to the camera very much. You'll be able to see the texture in this one pretty well. So these are all examples of different kinds of book cloth. The traditional way of making book cloth is with wheat paste and some kind of backing material to paste on the back of the fabric. But this traditional way, while it is pretty much foolproof, I'm not gonna lie, it does its job. It's messy and there's a few steps. The process takes quite a while, and then you have to wait for everything to dry. So it's not a quick process whatsoever. That being said, it probably is one of the best ways. And all you have to do is Google, how do I make book cloth? And you will come up with a plethora of videos and blog posts showing you how to traditionally make book cloth if you want to do that yourself. So I'm not going to show you that because it's not necessary for me to redo that when it's already been done way better than I could ever do it. A more modern way that has been floating around the internet of late is using heat and bond iron-on adhesive with tissue paper. Again, I don't need to show you that because there's a billion and one different videos online showing how to use the heat and bond iron-on adhesive, and then you iron on tissue paper. I will say that I have used several different kinds of the heat and bond iron-on adhesive, and I personally like the Feather Light as opposed to the Ultra. Is just it's too much glue, and it'll make your book cloth really thick and heavy and hard to fold around the corners and turn the edges. But then there is a Feather Light, and then there is one that I haven't tried, and it's called Soft Stretch, and it is for knit fabrics, and it's supposed to be very malleable and lighter weight. So I'd like to try that one. I've tried the Ultra Hold, the Light, and the Feather Light, and the Feather Light is definitely the way to go. But I'd like to try the Soft Stretch and see how it compares to the Feather Light. Anyway, but again, that is a several step process. Do you see where I'm going here? I want once and done, once and done. So what I like to do personally is I like to use a fusible interfacing. Now, not all interfacings are made the same, and they are not equal. Let me tell you, there are different weights to interfacing, and there are some that you just don't want to use. So here is my scrap of fabric. It's some of the toasty oatmeal linen. And this is my interfacing. Now, this one isn't the one that I love, 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 but this is the one that I have, so this is the one that I'm going to use. And it's a Pellon brand, and this happens to be the fusible featherweight. And I realize this is going to get all kinds of confusing because we're talking about Heat and Bond and we're talking about Pellon, which are two different companies, and they have some of the same names but for different products. So I apologize. You would think featherweight would be the lightest, most airiest interfacing that you could get through Pellon. But no, it is not. sheer weight is going to be a lighter product. And some of you may be very, very familiar with different types of interfacing if you do apparel, sewing, or different kinds of sewing crafts. You're going to know way more about interfacing than I do. I personally like the sheer weight Pellon interfacing. It's my favorite, but I am out of it because I used it all up. And I have some of the featherweight. It's not bad. Because let's say you have a fairly lightweight fabric in the first place. Like this is a pretty flimsy fabric. And you could even get something that was even more sheer than this. So the featherweight interfacing won't be that bad. But if you're going to use a heavier kind of fabric, like this one, for example, it already has some bulk and some heft to it. So ironing this onto it is going to make it even bulkier. It won't be bad and it won't be unusable. It will just be more difficult to get your edges and your corners turned crisply. I'm kind of a stickler with my edges and my corners, and so I try to make it as easy as I can to get those edges crisp, because that is one of the hardest parts of bookbinding, is getting your corners and your edges on point. Just FYI. Long story short, with a thicker fabric, I would not use this heavy of an interfacing, even though this is not heavy interfacing by any means. There's going to be other brands that have other types of interfacing. What I would suggest is getting some of the Pellon sheer weight, and then you'll be able to compare it, because you'll be able to physically hold it and feel it and see how thick it is. And then that way, if you have a fabric store near you or another place that carries interfacing, you'll be able to take a little sample with you, and you'll be able to feel the different brands and find out which one is equal to the sheer weight. Does that make sense? I hope so. Making the book cloth is pretty cut and dry from here, because there's instructions that come with your fusible interfacing. Of course, I use iron-on. I'm not going to use the sew-on because that would be, well, it wouldn't work. If you are using a fabric that you either are afraid or you've tested it and it looks like it could melt or scorch when you iron it, because you have to use an iron at a fairly high heat, then definitely use the wheat paste method. Just go that route, because there's no heat involved. And most fabrics can be used as long as you think it will iron on to the interfacing. I'm sure there are some fabrics that will not iron on to interfacing, but I tend to use the more natural fibers, the linens, the cottons, that kind of thing. All that kind of stuff is pretty good about adhering to the interfacing, so I don't usually worry about it. So what we do is we grab our, this is, I know it's like, looks filthy. Well, it's kind of, it's not filthy, it's just stained. This is my craft ironing board. So what the instructions say to do is they say to pin it. I'm not going to pin it. Sorry, not going to do that. If I was going to be doing this for real and not just for a demonstration, I would just take my whole piece of fabric and unroll what I was a nice size piece and lay that piece onto the ironing board. And I would cut the interfacing to be the size that I wanted it to be. And then after it's ironed on, I would cut around the interfacing. If you want to iron your fabric ahead of time, make it a little easier on you to get everything all laid out, go for it. And most certainly check and see if your fabric has a right and a wrong side. You just lay out your fabric, and you lay your interfacing with the adhesive little dots side down onto the wrong side, the back side. And then you get a damp cloth and you lay that over it. And then it says that we use the wool steam setting and we press firmly in each section for a full 10 seconds. And you want to overlap your iron as you go. And this is my teeny tiny little iron, so it might take a second. And I always recommend making a test swatch with the fabric that you want to use and the interfacing that you're using. And then that way you'll know. Of course, I say that, and do I ever do it? Sometimes. But it's like, you know, when people dye their hair and on the box it says to do a test swatch so that you know what's going to happen. How many people actually do that? There are some very responsible adults out there, oh, and children, that do test swatches, and God love them, because the rest of us can't be bothered. But you know who you are. You don't have to confess. But if you find that your pressing cloth is too thick, then you just get a lighter weight one. And then I throw caution to the wind and I turn it over. Oh, I know you're not supposed to do this, but I know this fabric because I've used it before. And so I'm just going to turn it over and iron from this side to finish getting the rest of those little dots melted, because they were not all melted. Of course, I was not counting to 10 either, so. I'll let it cool. But once it's cooled off, you can fold it and bend it, and you should be able to tell if there are any areas where the interfacing didn't stick, because it'll bubble up. It won't want to sit flat. You can kind of go around the edges and fold it and make sure, but it looks pretty darn good. All right, I will move this aside, unplug my iron. And there you are, your book cloth is ready to use. I like this method because it is once and done. It takes a second to iron, but at least you're not ironing on two separate things. With the Heat and Bond iron-on adhesive, you iron on the Heat and Bond, and then you peel off the backing paper, and then you put the tissue paper or rice paper or kozo paper, you put that over that, and then you iron it again. And it works great. It works great. Just use the real light, super featherweight Heat and Bond adhesive stuff. But this is done in half the time because you're only ironing on one thing. But you know, sometimes if you just have Heat and Bond iron-on adhesive and tissue paper and you don't have any fusible interfacing, use what you got. I mean, that's the important thing, is to use up things that you have without having to go buy stuff, right? Even this featherweight, which is the next thickness up, is pretty nice. I mean, this is a smooth, lightweight, flexible book cloth. I've used this fabric with this interfacing on a book and it worked out just great. It's just not quite as thin and pliable as the sheer weight, but it's still great. Those are my opinions about making book cloth. And if you are new to bookbinding, then Once and Done might be for you. If you have been bookbinding for a while and you're like, no, I want to try the traditional method with the wheat paste and the rice paper, please do. I think it's a skill that all bookbinders should have under their belt anyway. I totally encourage learning traditional methods. Absolutely. And then the iron-on adhesive one, the Heat and Bond, that is a great shortcut. This is just a shorter shortcut. So I hope you enjoyed this little, hopefully quick video. We'll see when I edit it how quick it is. It's like, I think something's gonna be super quick and then I'm really opinionated about it, and so I chat about it. I just get real opinionated sometimes about the different methods because I've tried them all. And it's not that I'm right, it's just my opinion from my experience. So please take everything I say with a grain of salt. And if you aren't sure, try them all out for yourself. It's not an expensive process, any of them. For the wheat paste, the traditional one, you can buy wheat paste mixed through a bookbinder supply online. You can also get wallpaper paste, you know, in the powder, and mix it up as long as it's a wheat starch base. Don't use just flour. It's not gonna work. So please try all of the methods and let me know what you like. Or do you have a different method? Because there are other ways of, you know, I hate to say skin a cat because that's such a horrific, horrible saying, and I hate it. So we need to think of something else besides skin a cat, because that's awful. Let me know. Let me know what your druthers are as far as making book cloth. All right, kids, I hope everybody is having a great day. Those of you on the U.S. coasts, I hope everything is cooling off for you now. I know it was a deal. 116 in Portland. Y'all, that's rough. That's rough because you guys don't get that. So I'm sorry, you weren't prepared for that, and that was insane. So I hope everybody is doing great. Thank you for joining me today. It was great being with you, and I will see you really, really soon in the next video. Bye, guys.